Everyone,
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
how is everyone? How's the
الحمد لله.
madness? How's the madness in the United States?
It's pretty maddening, not gonna lie.
Yeah, my brother was telling me there's all these restaurants and bars and entertainment facilities that are like now permanently closed all over the country, like they'll never open again.
Wow.
Well, I mean, when you can't have any business for almost a year, you can't survive. You can't survive on
Yeah,
government loans forever.
that's true. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you guys something. You should be aware of this. Remember that in the last age, Dajjal will be in everything. Okay, so for example, you guys have all heard about these quote unquote stimulus packages. What is a stimulus package? Right. Well, everyone basically just understands it as free money from the government. But what is it actually? Well, the government is you and me. I mean, we are the government. We elect our officials from amongst ourselves, allegedly. And then these people collect tax money from us. And that's the only money they have. Except that they invented this thing, which we talked about in our lesson about the mountain of gold. And they invented this thing called the Federal Reserve Bank. And it's basically a bank that can print money out of thin air. And whenever the government wants money, it goes to the bank and says, print us $2, $3, $4 trillion. And the Federal Reserve says, yeah, no problem. We'll lend you $4 billion and you'll pay us back $4 trillion, and you'll pay us back $5 trillion. The extra trillion is the interest that you'll pay us back, because we're a bank and that's how we make money, is through interest payments. So the federal government says, yeah, no problem. We have 330 million citizens, and 100 million of them can work, and we estimate they'll live this 70 years, and they'll be able to put out this much work output, and then we'll be able to collect back this much of their taxes over that period of time. And we'll be able to pay you back with interest. And then everyone gets a check in the mail. Everyone's like, yay, free money from the government. Nope. All you got was a loan from a bank that you and I and everybody else and our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren are responsible to pay back to the Federal Reserve through our tax money over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. There is no such thing as a free check. It doesn't happen. It's either coming out of your own pocket or it's just a loan that you have to pay back. And that's what Dajjal does. He uses a word, right? Stimulus check, but the meaning of it is loan. And this comes right out of the Quran, where Allah talks about how the Jews, they play with words. For example, Allah talks about how when they talk to the Prophet, they say ra'ina, which means like our shepherd. A ra'i is a shepherd. So ra'ina, our shepherd. And they're making fun of the Prophet by saying that, because he used to shepherd the sheep in Mecca, and it's like their little way of making fun of him. Like he's our guide, we're his sheep, so he's our shepherd. And Allah talks about how they do things like that, or they would say to him, what is it? Sa'amu alaykum. Not salamu alaykum, but sa'ahu alaykum, which means like death be upon you. Right? So they play with words, but in the world of Dajjal, the same thing happens. We have what is a terrorist, guys? A terrorist is anybody who's against the Western imperialism. Anybody and everybody. If you're against Western imperialism, you're a terrorist. A freedom fighter. What is a freedom fighter? Let's talk about freedom fighters in Syria and freedom fighters in this place and freedom fighters. Freedom fighters are hired mercenaries. They're being paid by Western governments, sometimes through the back door. Right. I mean, we could go on and on and on. Transparency. This is a word you'll hear a lot used in the media. Transparency just means secrecy. It means the exact opposite. Like, we're being transparent about this investigation. Like, no, they're being very secretive about it, actually. Right. So be aware that Dajjal is corrupting everything. Okay, so without further ado, Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Tonight we'll talk about Isa alayhi salatu salam and how he is going to return. And then we'll talk about his relationship to Imam al-Mahdi, and we'll finish out the 10 major signs. Who off the top of their head can name the 10 major signs? Which one of you thinks you can do it?
All right.
Bismillah.
Okay. There's the smoke.
Dukhan.
Dukhan. Sun rising from the east, or sorry, from the west.
Mm-hmm.
There is Dabatul Ard.
Beast of the earth.
Dajjal.
Dajjal, that's 4.
There is the fire that will spread from Yemen.
It drives the people to their place of assembly.
There is Ya'juj and Ma'juj, the emergence of Ya'juj and Ma'juj.
Okay, you got 6.
Isa alayhi salam will come back.
Mm-hmm. And then the last 3 are very easy.
And the last 3 is the earthquakes in the west, the east, and the Arabian Peninsula.
Well, a better translation would be landslides, or like the earth sinking down. Not necessarily an earthquake.
Landslides.
Now, we talked about the one in the east, the one in the west. We didn't talk so much about the most important one, which is the one in Arabia. So the one in Arabia signifies the coming of Imam al-Mahdi. Okay, and that's very important. Anybody, guys, anybody that comes, whether his name is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi or Osama bin Laden or whatever other creature that they pull out of the dark abyss of fakery, who claims to be the Mahdi or some Khalifa or whatever, unless an army from Syria attacks Mecca and Medina and they sink into the ground, that person is a liar. 100% guaranteed every time. So when the CIA and Mossad and MI6 and all these organizations try to produce their fake Mahdi, because they will, they already produced their fake caliphate with ISIS. And the whole idea behind that was to make not only non-Muslims, but Muslims afraid of the Khalifa, afraid of the Khilafah, afraid of the Islamically governed land. It was to create a Dajjalic version that was just horrible and really didn't follow Islam at all, but was just basically a bunch of murderous thugs that were all paid and supplied by Western countries, by the way. People always ask, like, okay, well, where do ISIS manufacture their weapons? They don't have a weapons manufacturing plant. Where do they get their oil for their cars and transport? They don't have their own oil. They had to get all of it from somewhere. Mainly from Barack Obama. He was a big supplier of ISIS. But you guys can look that up on your free time. But Imam al-Mahdi, the real one, and the real Khilafah will not come until Imam al-Mahdi comes. That sign of the earth sinking in Arabia is the sign of the actual Mahdi. Okay. Now, what actually happens? What's the timeline of events? And we touched on this a while back, but there is a timeline of events that we should be looking for. Okay.
Sheikh.
Yes.
I was gonna ask you this question about the hadith of the 10 signs.
Mm-hmm.
Does the hadith state a specific order for them?
No, there is no order to them, and I think that's because some of them they happen at the same time, while others of them kind of happen at other times. But as far as I understand, there is no specific order to them. Okay, so let's get to our timeline of events. Okay. Does everyone see the screen fine?
Yes.
Umranu Bayt al-Maqdis. So when you see Jerusalem, that's Bayt al-Maqdis, being built up, okay, that's what Umran means, like to build something up. Kharabu Yathrib. You're going to see Yathrib, which is Medina, in a state of kharab, okay? The best way I know how to describe kharab to my knowledge would be here in Egypt. You see a lot of like old buildings that have like collapsed in on themselves. So you'll be walking down the middle of Cairo and you'll see some buildings, and all of a sudden you'll just see one building that's just completely like fallen in on itself. This is like kharab. So Umran is the opposite. So these are analogies, right? Whenever you see Jerusalem in a state of flourishment and doing well, but you see Medina really serving no role in the world, then that's what you're going to see. One is up, the other one's down. So when you see the other one down, وَخَرَابُ يَثْرِبْ خُرُوجُ الْمَلْحَمَةِ. Okay, the next thing that's going to happen is the Great War. Okay, does anyone remember what is that war going to be fought over?
Oil.
Which is called what in the Hadith?
The gold.
The mountain of gold under the Euphrates River.
Yeah.
Okay, and we said it's called that because when the world economic system transferred over to paper currency, that paper currency was backed by gold. Okay, but then when the currency was no longer backed by gold anymore in the 70s, it became backed by the petroleum industry in the Middle East. And that's why it got the name the petrodollar. But it's so interesting that there would be this term in English, black gold, right? So anyway, referring to oil. So the hadith is difficult to understand until certain historical events took place, right? And that's why for the majority of history, scholars would have said this is very literal, because none of these historical events had taken place yet. So we don't blame them for having that understanding. This perfectly makes sense. But now that we've lived to see the petrodollar come into emergence and the gold standard go away and all that stuff, we can kind of understand this hadith differently. So the Melhama will be fought over the mountain of gold. After that, وخروج الملحمة فتح القسطنطينية. Qastantiniya. I have trouble pronouncing this word. The opening of Constantinople. I'm sure you guys have all heard that Mahmed II, also known as Muhammad al-Fatih, conquered Constantinople in the 1400s. And
1453.
1453. Thank you for reminding me. And he declared himself like all kinds of names, but the one thing he declared himself was the person who conquered Constantinople in the prophecy. What is the problem with that? Does anyone notice the glaringly obvious problem with his claim?
None of the things listed happened.
Right. None of them. Not a single one of them. Especially the Melhama. The Melhama did not happen. There is no fight over any mountain of gold that was taking place on Earth, whether literal gold or black gold. I'm just going to show you some interesting things about this guy. We're just going to take a little detour here for a second. I just want you to just learn a little bit about this fellow. Mehmet II. Let's see here. Mehmed the Conqueror. Oh boy. Look at this guy's signature. This is a signature. Is that not a strange looking signature to you guys? What does it look like?
Like a swordfish. Looks
Don't
like
look
an
too
eye.
hard. Looks like an eye, doesn't it? One eye.
Oh,
Very, very, very bizarre signature. And this guy instituted all kinds of really bizarre things. Fratricide, right? So killing your family members so that they're not allowed to be heirs to the throne. The Ottoman Empire did all kinds of really, really bizarre and un-Islamic things. Basically, all of Eastern Europe, which was Orthodox Christians, they would just attack them constantly and call it jihad. Guys, jihad in the Quran only has two conditions. Either A, you're fighting to protect your own religion from attack, okay? So oppression. Or other oppressed people, okay, have called on the Muslims to protect, to get them out of oppression. And then the Muslims have exhausted all possible peaceful means of resolving the issue. And there is no longer any peaceful recourse. Then Muslims can intervene, and that's called jihad also. Okay, but just attacking innocent people who have not attacked you is not jihad. Okay, just so you understand, there's no such thing as what's called offensive jihad. Although I will say that there are some pretty famous scholars who agree that there was, but I just completely disagree with them. He also instituted this idea of enslaving Orthodox Christian women and basically never have taking a wife, but just concubines. And then the children of those concubines would become the rulers of the Ottoman Empire. And then they would take these guys called janissaries. What's a janissary? It is a Orthodox Christian boy that you have enslaved. You have clipped off his manhood, okay, so that he can't make children anymore. And now you turn him into an elite fighting force. So not only are you unjustly fighting the Orthodox Christians in Eastern Europe who didn't attack us, you're actually taking their women to produce leaders who will then attack them more, and you're taking their children, forcibly converting them to Islam, making them into eunuchs and having them attack them back. I mean, you can't even be more insulting than the Ottoman Empire was to Eastern Orthodox Christians in Europe. Not only that, but they took the seat of the Khilafah out of the Arab world, right? So they weren't the first non-Arab people to rule over the Muslim Khilafah, but they were the first non-Arab people to take the seat of the Khilafah and move it from the Middle East, Arab-speaking world to a non-Middle Eastern, non-Arab-speaking world, which is Constantinople, which was a very, very bad move, and strategically a bad move, because it kind of left the Middle Eastern world more exposed. Now, that's not to say that the Ottoman Empire was all bad. But as my teacher, Imran Hussein, said, they did a lot of Dajjalic things. And not only that, but for this guy to claim that he was the quote unquote liberator of Constantinople mentioned in this hadith is just absurd. It's absolutely absurd, because this is a clear statement and mentioned in 2 hadith books. So after the conquering of Constantinople, which is yet to come, guys, it hasn't happened yet. And I know that doesn't make sense to you, because once again, you got to understand, Dajjal will do fake versions of these things. So the fake version already happened 600 years ago. That was the fake version. And the biggest glaringly obvious Dajjalic thing this guy did was he took Hagia Sophia, which is a church. Okay, it belongs to the Orthodox Christian Church, and he stole it. There's absolutely zero historical evidence that he bought this church from these Christians. That's a total and utter lie. And I know that because I actually talked to a Muslim historian about it, and he said the same thing. There's no historical evidence for that. But then he took their church and he just turned it into a masjid. Okay, guys, where is that justified in the Quran anywhere? Wherever did the prophet take Christian churches and convert them into mosques? When did the companions take Christian churches and turn them into mosques? Never, not even once. In fact, when the companions came into Syria, when they conquered Syria, there was a church in Damascus known as the Church of John the Baptist, Yahya alayhi salam. And they asked permission from the Christians if they could build a musalla next to it, right? They didn't say like, oh, we're going to come tear down your church. And no. It wasn't until Marwan the first became Khalifa that he, a non-companion, decided that he was going to tear down the church of John the Baptist and build the current white, or the current, I don't know if it's called Jami Masjid in Damascus.
The
with the white
Masjid, no?
Yeah. So it's an Umayyad mosque, basically. And he was the first person to come up with this idea that we can just take over churches and tear them down. Prior to him, this didn't exist. No, none of the companions or anything. People will make the argument that companions attacked Constantinople, right? And that's true. But they didn't attack it with the intention of taking the church from the Christians. That was not their goal at all. So don't fall for that argument when people try to make that argument. They're like, oh, this companion, blah, 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 he died outside the gates of Constantinople. That's proof of what? Did he say he was trying to conquer Constantinople so he could take Hagia Sophia and convert it into a mosque? No, absolutely zero evidence for that. But that's what Mahmed II did. And that's totally wrong, considering that in Surah Al-Hajj, it says very clearly that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not allow one group of people to fight another, then churches, monasteries, synagogues, and mosques in which Allah's name is mentioned often would be torn down all over the earth. So something to be aware of. So after the conquering of Constantinople, Khuruj ad-Dajjal, okay? So currently we see Jerusalem being made the center of attention in the world, and we can thank President Donald Trump for that. More and more countries are starting to recognize Jerusalem as the official capital of the Dajjalic state of Israel. And we see that Medina really plays absolutely no role in the life of Muslims anymore, other than, let's be honest, a vacation spot. That's exactly what it is. I've been there, I know. It's just a big tourist town. People go there so they can go visit the gigantic mega super palace that they built there around the Prophet ﷺ's grave. And it's amazing. I mean, no one can lie. It's probably one of the most beautiful buildings in the whole world. And by the way, this is a hadith. Since we're talking about signs of the hour, you guys should see that. So, Dajjal, White Palace, Ahmed, hadith. This is a very interesting hadith. So Rasulullah addressed the people, asking them 3 times. And he said that Dajjal will come and climb Mount Uhud. Okay? So he'll come all the way to Mount Uhud, but he won't go into Medina because he can't. Then he will say to his friends, do you see the white palace? That is Ahmed's masjid. Then he will come down towards Medina. Medina to Munawwara, but every path he will encounter an angel with an unsheathed sword. Okay? So that was not the case for most of history. But today, Medina contains a gigantic white palace. In fact, I think you can even see it from quote unquote space. I mean, it's unbelievable. And it's all white and surrounded by a special white marble. I think they told me they imported it from Pakistan, but I'm not sure. So that is a sign of the hour that has definitely come true, guys. You can show that to just about anybody. There's really no denying it. But currently, if you look at around Medina, let's see if we can find a picture of it. they are basically destroying all of the hotels around Medina. I don't think there's any good pictures here of it, but and a lot of the historical sites around Medina are being destroyed, like just bulldozing them. Because basically, the Saudi government has come to the conclusion that, you know, like all this historical stuff is great, but we can get more people to come make Umrah and Hajj if we just tear all this stuff down. It leaves more flat places for people to pray. So they're bulldozing everything: mountains, old houses of the companions, you know, historical sites that you can read about in hadith literature. It's all being just mowed down. So there is a literal aspect to Medina being in ruins today, but there's also a symbolic ruin. In other words, it serves no function for our ummah. You know, guys, Hajj and Umrah used to be basically where you would receive global directives for the ummah. Okay, so every week in your town you have 5 daily prayers, and then you have Jumu'ah. At Jumu'ah, your local emir would tell the community what to do every week. That's what Jumu'ah used to be inside of a functioning khilafah. And then you would you'd have Salatul Eid each year, when all of the people would gather together in one time, and you'd receive your Eid khutbah, which was what the community should be doing for the next year. But then all of the Muslim community would make Hajj once a year, and all the emirs and all the leaders would come together and they would discuss what the whole ummah should be doing for the year. That no longer happens, okay? But that's how things used to be. Now Hajj really doesn't function as anything other than, let's be honest, a basic vacation. And that's how it's sold. It's vacation packages is what it looks like to me. So those two things, guys, are already happening. So the next thing that's going to happen is Khuruj al-Malhama. Okay, that's the next thing on our list. And then after that, the conquering of Constantinople. And then after that, the Dajjal. Now, where does Imam al-Mahdi fit in all this? So Imam al-Mahdi cannot come until Dajjal comes. So he's contemporaneous with the conquering of Constantinople. So there's a hadith that mentions that the conquering of Constantinople will be done by a great emir and a great army. Okay, but it doesn't name the emir or the army. But what's implied here is that it's Imam al-Mahdi's army. Okay. And then between the it's either the conquering of Constantinople and Dajjal, or the Melhama and Dajjal is either 7 months or 7 years, according to two different hadiths. In Abu Dawood, he says that the more authentic narration is 7 years. So in a nutshell, once the Melhama happens, everything else starts happening very quickly in terms of like time. And we can already see a world set up for a Melhama, right? We have like all of these major world powers, Russia against Europe and America, Israel against really everybody, but you know, seemingly friends with Europe and America. And you have Russia connected with China. These are all nuclear powers. And of course, all of them need petroleum very badly to maintain their technological advancements. So you already see a world that's set up for this to happen. And then you already see the chaos happening in the Middle East around the Euphrates River. Everything from the war in Iraq to the civil war in Syria, to the current conditions in Lebanon, which Brother Adi can tell us more about on the ground because he's there. And then you see this constant barrage of just propaganda in the West against Iran. And then you have the America still in Afghanistan to this day. I saw a really interesting meme one time that was like it was like an older army guy in Afghanistan talking to a young infantry guy who was actually his son, right? Because it's been so long since the war started that you could actually have had children when the war started, and your children are now old enough to join the military and also be there in the war with you. That's how long we've been there. So, and we're there for a very specific reason, right? It's not the reasons that you're being told. It's not to fight terrorism. the reason we're in Afghanistan, there's multiple reasons, but the main one is to be there when all this goes down, so that there's already an army there on the eastern side of Iran. So in a nutshell, we can see this already setting itself up. So Imam al-Mahdi will most likely be the one who conquers Constantinople, and then he will have to face Dajjal, okay? And the sign is the sinking of the earth. That's the main thing. Basically, in a nutshell, Imam al-Mahdi, when he's selected to be Imam al-Mahdi, he will be in Mecca and he'll flee to Medina. Once he gets to Medina, the people will forcibly pledge bay'ah to him. So for most of Islamic history, you had like an emir or a khalifa, and you would give bay'ah to him, which is allegiance.
Sheikh,
Yes.
doesn't he leave Medina and go to Mecca?
I'm sorry, you're correct. So once that happens, that's when the army from Syria will attack, okay? That doesn't mean a Syrian army will attack. It just means there's going to be some kind of army in Sham that will attack him, right? And there's plenty of non-Muslim armies in Sham right now. So they'll attack Mecca, and then as they're coming to attack, the earth will sink. And when that happens, that's what legitimizes him as the real Mahdi. Now, where does Isa fit into this picture? Okay. So first off, we know that Isa is the Messiah. He's the real Messiah. And that they attempted to kill him, but they did not succeed in killing him. God took his soul. God raised him to himself. And what is the evidence that Isa will return? Now, a few years ago, there was a guy, his name was Mufti Abu Layth. He's a guy out of Britain. Really smart guy, actually. Pretty well trained. But he started claiming that this idea that Isa returns is only found in hadith literature, that it's not based in the Quran. And he said that all of these hadith about Isa coming back are actually fabrications from Christian converts to Islam in the early Muslim Ummah. That they brought this idea of the second coming of Jesus into the Islamic tradition, and they just attributed these hadith to the Prophet, peace be upon him, who actually never said these things. The problem is that all of these hadith about Jesus coming back are pretty authentic. And the idea that they were able to fool all of the companions into believing in this is also quite strange. But the Quran actually supports this pretty well. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Where does the Quran mention that Jesus will return? So firstly, we need to understand that the Quran mentions أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا, O you who believe, كونوا أنصار الله, be like the helpers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كما قال عيسى ابن مريم للحواريين من أنصاري إلى الله. Just like when Jesus said, the son of Mary, to his disciples, who are the helpers of Allah. قال الحواريون, the Hawariyun said, the disciples said, نحن أنصار الله, we are. Okay. فآمنت طائفة من بني إسرائيل وكفرت طائفة. So some of the children of Israel believed and some of them disbelieved. And this is referring to the fact that when the Messiah first came, he was going to be like Moses in many ways. Moses told the children of Israel to go into Philistine and fight the Philistines to take over the land, and they refused. And the Messiah was going to tell the children of Israel to fight the Romans. And some of them believed and some of them refused. The ones that refused wanted to get rid of him because they knew they thought that they couldn't fight the Romans. And that Isa would not be able to lead them properly. And then Allah says something very interesting. وَأَيَّدَنَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Then he assisted those who believe. عَلَىٰ عَدُوِّهِمْ, over their enemies. فَأَصْبَحُوا ظَاهِرِينَ, and made them successful. Did this happen yet? Do we see the followers of Isa taking over their enemies? Well, we did in one form. The disciples and the followers of Isa after him for a long time were persecuted by the Roman army until the Romans actually became Christians. So by the year 370, Constantine, the Roman emperor, converts to Christianity. So here we have a prophecy in the Quran or the Quran referring to a historical event prophecy, probably. But there's an indication here that there's still this idea that the followers of Isa will be successful over the disbelievers. Also, we find this statement in the Quran. With قال الله يا Isa. Remember when Allah said to Isa, this is referring to the crucifixion event. Inni mutawaffika. I'm going to take your soul out of your body. وَرَافِعُكَ إِلَيْهِ, and raise you to myself. وَمُطَهِّرُكَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, and purify you from those who disbelieve in you as the Messiah. And then this very interesting phrase, وَجَاعِلُ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوكَ فَوْقَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. And then I'm going to cause those who follow you to be over those who disbelieve in you, إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ, until the day of judgment. That's a very interesting statement. Can we, looking at back over the last 2,000 years, can we say that the people who really believed and followed Isa have been dominant over the people who rejected him to this day and will be until the day of judgment? I mean, that doesn't seem to be the case. So it seems to be something that has to still happen. Because it doesn't indicate here that there's some sort of time when they won't be over the disbelievers. It's saying, وَجَعِلُ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوكَ فَوْقَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. It has to be that the believers are dominant over the disbelievers to the day of judgment. I mean, that's a very clear statement in Arabic. إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ, to the day of judgment, to the end of the world. So once again, there's an indication that the followers of Isa have to still have something left to do. But where does Isa come in the picture? Right here, guys. This is so beautiful. How do we know Isa alayhi salam is coming back? Well, there's a very clear hadith where Imam al-Mahdi and Isa meet each other, okay? If you don't know this hadith, it's very interesting. But basically, Imam al-Mahdi and his army are about to fight Dajjal in the masjid in Damascus that used to be the church of John the Baptist. Yahya alayhi salam. And the Dajjal and his army are outside the gates about to enter, and the Fajr prayer comes in. So Imam al-Mahdi, is the Iqama is made, and all of a sudden Isa is descending out of the sky back to the earth on the like resting on two angels. And when he lands on the earth, Imam al-Mahdi asks him to lead the Muslims in prayer. Where did Isa learn how to pray like a Muslim? Does he know Surah Al-Fatiha? Does he know the Tashahud, At-Tahiyyatu Lillah? What surahs of the Quran has he memorized? What kind of person educated in the religion of Islam would ask someone who doesn't know how to lead prayer to lead us in prayer? Unless Isa does know. Allah says at least twice in the Quran, وَيُعَلِّمُهُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَالتَّوْرَاةَ وَالْإِنْجِيلَ, that Allah has taught Isa the book, the wisdom, the Torah, and the gospel. Now we know what the Torah and the gospel are. And hikmah is wisdom. What is al-kitab? Well, if you look in the tafasir, it says something very strange. Al-kitab means handwriting. What does handwriting have to do with these other three things? Nothing. In fact, we don't even have any examples of Jesus writing anything. In fact, as far as we understand it, his gospel was an oral tradition that was later written down by disciples. In fact, the only thing I could find of Jesus writing anything was at one point the scholarly Jews like surround Jesus and they bring a woman who's committed zina, and they ask him like, should we stone her? And he begins to write on the ground the sins of the scholars, like that they've committed that people don't know about. And then after he writes all their sins down on the ground, he asks them, okay, any of you who don't have any sins, you pick up the stone first and you throw it at her. Other than that, I don't even find anything about Jesus writing anything with his hand. In fact, it may very well be that he was very much like the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't know how to write. But what sounds way more correct is that the kitab being referred to here, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, is the book about which there is no doubt, the Quran. And that's why Imam al-Mahdi asks him to lead Salat, because he already understands that Isa knows the kitab. Otherwise, if you don't even know how to recite Al-Fatiha, how can you lead the Muslims in prayer? It doesn't make any sense. So Jesus knows the Quran. And that's important because he's not coming back to just people of the book, people of Torah and Injil. He's coming back to a world full of Muslims who have a Quran. So here's one of our major proofs that Jesus is coming back from the Quran. What's another proof? Allah says, وَأَيَّدْتُكَ بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ, that I helped, assisted, aided Jesus with the Holy Spirit. يُكَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ وَكَهْلًا. And this enabled him to speak to people when he was an infant and when he is a very old man. Now, every historical account I've ever read about Jesus from Muslim and Christian traditions say that Jesus was most likely in his 30s when he was raised into the heavens, okay? That does not qualify as kahla in Arabic, or kahlan, okay? Kahlan is like you're in your 80s, like, 70s, 80s, you're an old man. Furthermore, I'd like to point out something quite obvious from this statement. This is in a long succession of quote-unquote miracles that Jesus can do. Like it talks about him raising the dead by the permission of Allah and many other things. So we can tell right off the bat that when an infant baby speaks, and we're talking, yukallimu means intelligent speech, not just like making, sounds like babies do, but like I'm speaking to you now, intelligent speech. So an infant speaking is obviously miraculous. Like no one would expect that. But an old man speaking intelligently, there's nothing absolutely miraculous about that. In fact, many of the masajid on earth today are full of old men who are teaching Islam to people, So how is that even a miracle? It's only a miracle if people thought you were dead and 2,000 years have passed and you come back and you live to be an old man and you speak to people still. That would be the only possible way that would be miraculous. Other than that, it makes absolutely no sense to say that it's miraculous that he speaks as an old man. Not even remotely miraculous. So we see clearly as day from the Quran that not only does Jesus have to come back for this verse to even be true, and by the way, this is mentioned more than once in the Quran. It's not like this is just one random ayah. Allah talks about Jesus' miracle of وَيُكَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ وَكَهْلًا at least twice, once in Surah Al-Ma'idah and once in Surah Ali Imran. So he has to come back in order to fulfill the part about speaking as an old man. And then the only way that that's miraculous, similar to speaking as an infant, as if people thought he was dead and he came back as an old man. Because remember, he's not coming back to be born again from a woman and grow up to be an adult. He's going to come back as a fully formed adult out of nowhere and speak to people intelligently without having grown up, for them to see him grow as a baby to a man. So at least there are three pretty clear pieces of evidence from the Quran that Jesus has to return. Okay? Now, we'll end tonight by trying to understand why he has to return. Okay? If you read the Bible will give you two different pictures of the Messiah. One of them is this kind of suffering servant, which is what he's called. He's the servant of God who really goes through lots of trials and tribulations. It's mentioned a lot in the book of Psalms, which is called the Zabur in Arabic. But then there's this other picture of the Messiah where he comes back as this triumphant ruler and no one can touch him and he doesn't even stub his toe on a rock and he's just unstoppable. These are the two pictures of Isa, the beginning of his mission in which he suffers greatly at the hands of the children of Israel. But then there's the second half of his mission where he comes back to rule the world. The Prophet ﷺ says Isa will come back, hakim wa adl, like as a just ruler over the world. So in a nutshell, Isa and his mom are called a sign. Okay? What are they called a sign for? Well, you guys all know a sign. You all drive cars, right? If you go down the road and you get to the intersection and you see that stop sign, right? If you don't heed it, you might get T-boned or you might get a ticket or you might cause an accident. So you have to read the sign, you have to understand what it means, and you have to act upon it. So the ayat of the Quran are the same way. They're signs, right? As you read them, you're supposed to reflect on their meaning, comprehend it, and then act upon it. Otherwise, you might get harmed. And whoever follows the guidance, la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. Like they have nothing to fear, and nor will they grieve. So what are we supposed to read from the life of Mary and Isa? Well, let's understand some things. Who is Maryam? Maryam is a girl who's born from a woman who can't have children. So here we have the mother of Maryam making dua. Or I'm sorry, Zechariah, the prophet, making dua that his wife, or that he'll have a child, but his wife is old and barren. So suddenly she has a child. Then her child is born without a father. So Maryam gives birth. There's no dad. So we see in both cases of Maryam and Isa, alayhim assalam, they're born in a way that is physically impossible. Now let's look at what Jesus is able to do. Jesus, alayhi salam, is able to actually raise people from the dead. There's two people mentioned in the Gospels that he raises from the dead: Lazarus and the woman, the widowed woman's son. And then Isa is thought to be dead for almost 2,000 years, right? And all of a sudden, we're going to see him alive. Actually, all of mankind will see him alive, right? That's physically impossible. Most of the miracles of Isa are him taking something that isn't alive or perceived to not work and making it work and making it come alive. So a person who's blind, their eyes are dead, he gives them life. A person who has leprosy, their skin on their is dead, he gives it life. He takes a clay bird, he molds the clay into a bird, he gives it life. Okay? He's thought to be dead on the cross, but yet he's alive and then raised into the heavens. When you really ponder over all of these things and you put them all together, everything about the life of Maryam and everything about the life of Isa is telling you this. وَإِنَّهُ لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ. That in the entire existence of Jesus is a sign of the Sa'ah, the hour. فَلَا تَمْتَرُنَّ بِهَا. So that you don't doubt it. In other words, if you're seeing God give life to these things that have no life, and bringing people back from the dead, and bringing people back that shouldn't be alive, and giving life to people that don't have fathers and don't have mothers and fathers, this is all signs for you to think, oh my goodness, wait, if Allah can do that, then he can bring me back. And so there is an afterlife, and I'd better start living my life like there is an afterlife. And how do we understand Jesus being this great sign? Is because he's coming back to a world that has been infected with Dajjal's deen. What is Dajjal's deen, guys? It is a deen of materialism, a deen that teaches you that this world is all there is. So get everything you can here, because there's nothing in the afterlife to live for. So you should have a very nice life here. You should eat the best food, have the best living, the best clothes. You should have the most enjoyment. You should have the most happiness. Anything that prevents your happiness, you should get it out of your life, because this is where you're supposed to be happy. You're not supposed to be sad here. You're not supposed to be miserable here. You're not supposed to experience difficulties here. You're supposed to just enjoy this life, because this is all there is. You have nothing to look forward to. And so that's why today so many people have no faith in the afterlife, and you can see by the way they live their life. They're only concerned about their own personal happiness, and they're not concerned about anyone else's. They want everything to be done in this world, right? So they don't pray. They don't have any relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And most certainly they don't believe in an afterlife. They may say that they do, but you can see by their actions that they don't. So Isa comes back finally to be the ultimate sign to all of the disbelieving peoples of the world that know if he's back, then you're going to come back. So in a nutshell, we say Allah and his messenger knows best about our series on the 10 major signs and some of the minor signs that we covered along the way. A lot of the things we interpreted them so that we could understand them. And in the light of historical events that have happened, and we tried to connect them all together so that we can understand that that there is a relationship between the 10 signs. Some of them, as you said, are already happening, and some of them will happen. But our basic interpretation was that Dajjal will use Gog and Magog to take over the world. Gog and Magog will create the beast all over the earth that the Antichrist will be able to use to achieve godlike powers. And this is the technology. Really, I mean, when you read the hadith about all the things Dajjal will be able to do, imagine just the absolute peak of technology, like where it just cannot get any more better. That's what he'll have. Like he'll have absolutely every state-of-the-art thing that's available today and in the future. And so he will appear to be God. He'll be able to do anything, but only because of the beast and the technology. He can't do anything without these things. And we said that those are directly connected. Oh, and the Gog and Magog will achieve this through the sun rising from the west, right? That it's a false sunrise that the world will look towards, and that will create. That's related to the mountain of gold under the Euphrates River, which the beast needs to survive. The beast, the technology that Dajjal will utilize to appear to be as God, is only powered by these fossil fuels. Once the fossil fuels run out, the beast will fail. Dajjal will have no powers anymore. Isa will descend, Imam al-Mahdi will come. And not only that, but there'll be the Melhama, which will destroy most of the nations of the world. And it will cause at least the interpretation we gave is that it will cause the sinkings, the landslides in the east and the west and in Arabia. So all of these things are related to each other. And then the minor signs, a lot of them are related to things Dajjal will use to corrupt the world. So he'll corrupt, especially he attacks women more than he does men. He attacks the family unit. He attacks food. He attacks politics. He attacks entertainment. He attacks male-female relationships. He attacks everything. I mean, there's almost nothing that he won't get his hands into. But his biggest weapon that he uses against humanity is riba, which is the fiat currency system that the entire world uses today, which is based on riba. We already talked about how the United States uses riba. They all the money that the United States basically has today is money it borrowed from a bank on interest. And then we continue to use this paper money, which is basically riba. And so even if we haven't borrowed money on interest to buy a house or a car, we're still using the paper money. And that's why the hadith says that even a man will say, like, I don't use interest, but verily the dust of it will be on him, right? There is a way out of the riba system, by the way, but it requires Muslims to cooperate in a very, very strategic way in small communities. Maybe we can talk about that sometime. So that is the end of my, I don't know, what's it been, 8-week presentation or 10-week presentation that we've done on the 10 major signs. You guys have any questions?
Alhamdulillah. Would it be possible for next week's session to have a brief review of like the major points? And I can probably bring up my notes that I took in all of these lectures to help with that.
No, you have to write a book for me.
You got it. I got you. Inshallah. So are we gonna? Is there like a plan to take this in another direction, inshallah, for next week's class?
I don't know. I mean, at this point, I've exhausted my own personal research on this issue.
Oh.
As far as like, I've presented to you all basically everything I know about this subject. I haven't gone into some of the stuff about the Christian and Muslims making sulh in the future. We can talk about that next week, I think, because there's these hadith traditions that mention that that the Rum and the Muslims will make sulh, right? So they'll make peace with each other. They'll come together, and the obvious reason being is that Christians and Muslims believe Jesus is the Messiah. Like, we may have differences on what that means, but we do know that Jesus is the only one who can be the Messiah. So believing Christians and Muslims will be the only people who reject Dajjal, like right off the bat. Like, no matter who he is or what he can do, if he's not Isa, we can't believe in him. So the reason I believe Muslims and Christians will have to become allies of one another in the end time is because they'll be collectively persecuted. Now, this is maybe getting ahead of myself, but today Dajjal is doing a good job making Christians and Muslims fight against each other. And the Ottoman Empire was a good example of that. But that won't be the case in the future. Because gradually, more and more and more, you're going to see authentic Christianity, not the Santa Claus Christianity that we have in the United States, but authentic Christianity and authentic Islam more and more persecuted. So the two groups will basically recognize that we have a common enemy and that we have enough in common with each other to work together for common good. And that's actually something I'm doing right now. I'm actually meeting with some Christians online that are more, you could say, friendly with the Muslim community. And we're talking about our commonalities that we have with each other and trying to form, relationships.
Speaking of commonalities, do you think it would be beneficial if we could, or if you could discuss, because I recently found out, or not found out, but I guess I learned a little bit more about the passages in the Bible that allude to the further revelation, which many many Muslims say that further revelation is Rasulullah Sallallahu and just Islam in general. Whereas many Christians I've talked to will say that's just like another reference to the Holy Spirit or something along those lines.
Well, yeah, I can do a whole class for you guys on Islam in the Bible. It'll blow your mind, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
And actually, it's related to all this. I'll show you how it's related to. It's related to Dajjal and a lot of things. So what would you prefer next week's lesson be on? The sulh between Christians and Muslims, or the signs of Islam in the previous scriptures?
My vote is the signs on Islam, but it's I guess it's the collective vote.
I love doing that class. It's one of my favorite ones.
Sheikh,
Same.
I'll get in touch with you later.
Okay.
Inshallah.
All right, Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, if you can do that, signs between Islam and Quran and Bible, I'm interested in that too.
Okay. Well, that'll be our next class then.
Inshallah.
It's very fascinating topic. Very fast. It gives me chills when I talk about it. It's so fascinating.
And it's
But
just
when
good for me, yeah. It's another layer of strengthening my faith, honestly.
Yeah, and it will directly relate to this program we're doing together. By the way, when is this stuff going to end up on YouTube?
Oh yeah, yeah, Zargum, go ahead.
Yeah, we have all the recordings. We just gotta upload. So inshallah, maybe by tomorrow, Bilal and I can collaborate and then get them all on the YouTube. We got all the recordings. Just gotta post them.
Yeah, inshallah.
What would be really cool is if you could also include your notes in the or not in the comment section, but in the description of the video.
Yep.
So like a person can easily, and this might be too much work, but if you could also timestamp where the stuff is located, that would be great.
Yeah, I can do that too. Yeah.
Because my idea is that this stuff could be broken up into smaller bits and pieces that can be watched. Because people today, they don't have the time span to sit through these hour-long classes, listening to my boring voice and.
No, for sure. I'm used to I listen to long lectures from like Muhammad Hijab and Daniel what's the name? Hakikaju or something like that.
Hakikaju, yeah.
Yeah, Hakikaju. So yeah, this is not an issue for me. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, if you guys would put that up as soon as possible, I would really appreciate it, because I'd like to have all of this information somewhere where I can reference it for myself and share it with other people. So there's a lot of good stuff.
So maybe you can make a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you, Zarkum, inshallah, later today. I was working on that YouTube channel and putting together the recordings, but inshallah, I'll reach out to you.
Okay, sure.
Yep.
And if y'all require any resources, any monetary assistance to get this done, let me know. I can handle that. It's not a problem. Don't be shy.
That shouldn't be a problem. It's just a matter of converting the recordings into an MP4 file and then uploading that onto YouTube. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Well, what's the future of MSA at UNCG now that Adi's gone?
Oh, they elected a new leader, Dauda.
Did she come to any of these classes?
Dauda is the brother. Dauda is the.
Oh, Dawood.
Yeah, his name is Dauda, but yeah, he attended our classes.
Yeah,
I think he was here last week.
Oh, okay, mashallah. That's the one I kept seeing. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, mashallah. Excellent. All right, and if you guys are interested, also Dr. Ibrahim Imara here said he wants to do a Quran dars with you guys over Zoom. And this guy, mashallah, man, his voice is so nice. It'll make you cry. But y'all just tell me when you want to start that, and I'll let him know.
Alhamdulillah.
Sure.
Sure.
Inshallah.
Basically, he'll teach the class, and then me and him collectively will kind of explain the rules that he's trying to teach that day. Although he's more than capable of explaining himself in English. I mean, the guy has almost no accent, and he's very, very highly educated in English. Very highly educated. His only issue is that he's blind, so he has a hard time writing papers for obvious reasons. But I'm trying to help him edit some of his papers now. In fact, if you guys want to do a really good deed, Dr. Ibrahim is looking for someone to help him edit his papers. Basically, what he would do is like a couple times a week, he would send you a Zoom link, and then you and him could sit down and go through his papers that he's written and just help pinpoint for him where he's making like grammatical errors or things like that. And I've done a session with him. It's not difficult at all, like, because I mean most of it's pretty well written. But occasionally he'll add a the when there doesn't need to be one, or he'll need to reword a sentence to make it sound more clear in English. But if you guys are interested in doing a really good deed and helping out like a PhD professor here in Egypt, let me know.
I would be open for that.
Okay, let me
Give him my name, my number, or my email.
put that in the chat real quick.
Okay, public or private with you?
Just, I mean, well, there's only 2 of us here, so or 3 of us here. So if
Oh,
you want to
this
make it
chat-
private, doesn't matter. Oh, okay, yeah, or you're in the WhatsApp group, right?
Yeah. That's what.
Okay, well, just immediately send me a private message on WhatsApp, and then I'll create a group with you and Dr. Ibrahim.
Okay, inshallah.
Okay. Now, the only thing to be aware of is that don't forget the 7-hour difference between us and him. Although he doesn't apparently sleep a lot, so he's up a lot late at night and then also early in the morning. All right, well,
then.
gentlemen, I need to leave and get up out here. Don't forget to send me that message. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام
Walaikum assalam
ورحمة
wa
الله
rahmatullahi
وبركاته.
wa barakatuh.